Well, we're going to get started. We're still missing a panelist, but when she arrives, she'll join us. So welcome to Positive Parenting Evening here at the library. We want to thank Lucy Hanley for giving us this marvelous space in the library. My name is Barb Dennis. I'm a retired educator from here in town and also the town poet laureate. So I can speak possibly to some of the cultural availability of programs for teens. I want to tell you about a very exciting theatrical season coming up at Thrown Stone. Hopefully you have your tickets. If not, get them soon. There are two amazing girl-centered shows, one called Athena and the other Hysterical. The Athena opens 15th?
The 15th.
15th, and then Hysterical, which is about cheerleaders, opens on the 25th.
The 23rd.
23rd, sorry about that. And also, Thrown Stone, they're amazing corporate community members. They also sponsor all sorts of events like tonight's talk and then other talks, which you can find on their website. They have a couple other ones coming up. I wanted to talk to you also about, let's get out to my left here, who is Live Girls.
Yes.
Live Girls, I should let you talk about it, but it's a program where girls who would like to take part in internships and get paid, which is a wonderful thing, rather than paying, which is what typically happens nowadays, can come through Live Girl. And Shamir Holmes will tell you a little bit more about it in a while. But they do fund these internships, and they work through the Connecticut Office of the Arts. A wonderful person there, Liz Shapiro, helps to coordinate these. And what's wonderful about the Thrown Stone internship is a lot of the internships tend to be in businesses and not cultural organizations. So Thrown Stone is going to have a wonderful intern, Victoria, starting with them a little later this summer. So thank you for helping us get a wonderful intern into the community. I'm going to start just basically giving some biographies of the panelists for this evening, and then I'm going to start after that with an individual question to each of the panelists, and then some general questions that any of them can chime in and participate in. But I'm going to start first with LaTanya. LaTanya Russell-Humes joined Fairfield County's Community Foundation in 2021. As Senior Director of the Fund for Women and Girls, LaTanya is responsible for executing the Foundation's long-term strategic plan for the fund, as well as day-to-day operations, grant-making, and asset development. Prior to joining the Community Foundation, LaTanya worked for the Boys and Girls Club of New Rochelle, where she served most recently as CEO. During her time there, LaTanya provided quality programs that allowed young people and their families to access services that might not otherwise be available to them. She is also an adjunct professor at Mercy College. Taylor Bobet, I apologize, has been the head coach of the Ridgefield High School dance team for 6, going on 7 years. She's soon to start her 7th year. When she started as coach, the team had never competed, and now they are the 2022 CIAC state champions and the 2022 New England regional champions for the first time in the history of the program. Taylor and my daughter was on the dance team for years, so it's come a long way. Taylor reports that she works on more than just dance in her program, clearly, focusing a great deal on building confidence and self-esteem, trust, and self-love within and among these teen girls. Being a part of something bigger than themselves has worked wonders and helped these young women overcome many personal battles in their lives. So welcome, Taylor. Down on the end there, our Y chromosome.
Not bad.
Matt Austin is the Director of Education, Training, and Outreach at the Center for Empowerment and Education, formerly the Women's Center of Greater Danbury. A graduate of Western Connecticut State University with a BA in English and a minor in theater arts, Matt has been heavily involved in the Fairfield County arts community over the last 20 years, working with many local theaters in a variety of capacities, including organizing various education programs. As the Director of Education, Training, and Outreach, Matt provides strategic direction for all department activities and represents the center on various community initiatives and collaborations. He is certified in domestic violence and sexual assault counseling. So welcome Matt as well. Now, and then Shamir, I'm so sorry. I don't have a bio for you. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Good evening, everyone. Shamir Holmes. I am a Bridgeport resident, but I am currently the program director at Live Girl, which is based out of New Canaan. And our mission is to build confident and inclusive leaders. We have programming from grades 5 all the way to college. Our programming is free, and we are looking forward to expanding outside of New Canaan and making sure that we reach more girls with an emphasis on more girls of color. So we're just here trying to make a difference and partnering with awesome organizations such as Throne Stone. We're excited to be here, and we're happy to help however we can.
Okay, so let's go. I'm going to start with the individual questions. LaTanya, could you tell us some of the initiatives benefiting teen girls and or parents of teen girls that the Fund for Women and Girls is currently supporting? And also, part 2, about some of the new initiatives included in your long-term strategies.
So I brought my cheat sheet because my memory is not what it used to be. So the Fund for Women and Girls, the primary focus is to support women and girls across Fairfield County to ensure that we are addressing economic and racial disparities in that support. But we support programs from Bridgeport to, I guess, Ridgefield. You're not the most southern, but you are the most west, I think, town. So, and those programs, I think, in terms of Ridgefield, would be Ms. President, which is a civic leadership program for girls that is actually, I think, based here. I certainly know that they serve young girls here. Live Girl, and Throne Stone Theater is one of our newer grantee partners since I've been here, I believe. I think this was the first cycle, correct? And Anchor Health in Stanford, which provides services I think, throughout Fairfield County, specifically for teens who identify as LGBTQ, and Girls with Impact, which also serves for the most part, countywide. And it is I would say an entrepreneurial training program, but it does so much more than that, so I feel like I'm cheating it when I say that. But we have a signature initiative that we invest pretty significantly in over a 4 to 5 year period. That signature initiative now is the Emmy program, which is done in partnership with Optimus Healthcare in Bridgeport. It serves 100 teens and women. The idea is to give women who are of childbearing age, hence the 12 to 49 year age range, control the tools and skills that they need to be in control of their own lives, and to have the skills and tools that they need to manage their own health care. It is pretty holistic in its delivery. And then, we have programs, some of the more recent organizations that we partnered with, Silver Source, that was one of our first funding opportunities that we've made in a long time for senior women who need assistance with sort of day-to-day living expenses, to women, veterans returning home who might need support to just get reacclimated to living civilian life. So if it has anything to do with women and girls in Fairfield County, we are likely to fund it and are interested in funding it. So if any of you in the audience happen to know of some wonderful organizations that are doing great work here in Ridgefield, please encourage them to reach out to us. We are actually about to enter our grant making cycle, so it could be more perfect timing. And I'd be more than happy. What I'm trying to do in my role is to get to know those organizations that we've not heard of. There's always those familiar partners, but one of the primary goals that I have in terms of strategy is getting to know those organizations that might not otherwise think that they would qualify for community foundation funding. They may be very small, and we've created on-ramps for them. There are small grant programs that can help them sort of build their capacity so that they can get to a place where they can ask for a more competitive funding level. But, you know, we fund things like domestic violence programs. We just recently completed a really exciting cohort for sexual violence prevention providers, where they did provided a curriculum to, believe it or not, boys. So it wasn't just about girls, it is about boys who more often than not are the perpetrators. And we did that by partnering with sports organizations and sports programs in public schools.
Excellent. Thank you. Very broad-based.
Barbara, you have one more introduction to make.
Oh,
Brianna's
good.
here.
Come on, oh, we need to get you a chair. Or is there a chair?
I am ready.
Yes. Hello. So, the remaining biography, I'm sorry, scroll back here. Okay, so Brianna Palici, did I say your name correctly?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Has a master's in social work from Sacred Heart University. She's been working and volunteering with kids and families since 2013 and enjoys assisting with finding support services within her clients' communities. Brianna has experience in both mental health and substance abuse areas. She's been with Kids in Crisis since 2019 when she started as a youth counselor. Currently, Brianna serves as a teen talk counselor at Ridgefield High School. So welcome, Brianna. Okay, and as I told these folks in the audience, I'm going to start with a single question for each person, and then we'll have some general questions. Okay, so Taylor, next to you. You said in your biographical statement that you sent me that, quote, when it comes to resilience and mental health, there is much to gain from athletics and being part of a team made up of other teens who share a common goal. What can parents do to strengthen or augment or dovetail with the relationship that develops between teen athletes?
To be honest, the first thing that comes to mind is one, signing your kid up for athletics and letting them be, like, just do that on their own, quite frankly. I think that when you sign a kid up for athletics, they're part of a team, and because they're part of a team, we become a family in the process of working towards a common goal. And I really encourage parents to let their teens become independent during that process and learn to be adults on their own. And in my program, I actually have least communication with parents throughout the program, and it's been amazing so far for the girls that I work with. I think that they feel safe with their team members. I think it's really important that the coach is really invested in the girls individually and creates bonds and relationships with them and becomes a role model for them and another kind of guide in their life that's separate from their parents at home, who they can confide in and talk to. And I've had amazing, incredible relationships with some of my students over the past 6 years that I wouldn't trade for anything. And I'm sure they've confided in me things they may have not confided in with their parents even. So it's a tough question, because I also want to say that it's really important for the parents to be supportive of their kids and maybe ask questions beyond, like, how was your day at school, and more personal feeling type questions, and create a safe environment for your kid to feel like they can connect and talk with you about those things. But also giving them the distance and space they need to become the adults that they're becoming.
Thank you. Great. And I know that can be hard on parents. as a parent.
Yes.
It can be difficult to give that freedom, but that's really good advice, very good. Okay, Matt, down to you.
All right, here we go.
So the Center for Empowerment and Education, which formerly the Women's Center of Greater Danbury, is the sole provider of services, including counseling to victims of domestic and sexual violence in the northern Fairfield County area, also southern Ridgefield.
Yep.
How do you bring the skills you've learned as a certified domestic violence and sexual assault counselor and what you've learned from working at the center to bear in working on community initiatives and collaborations that benefit teen girls and their parents?
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know.
What we do at the center, our main focus is domestic violence and sexual violence. My job is that education piece. I think education piece is one of the most important things. I always like to say an educated community is a safer community. And so we bring our education programs, we have programs preschool through adult, really. We do up until senior citizens, we do programs for them too. We do age-appropriate education on various topics that sort of lay the foundation. So with the smaller ones, we're talking about empathy, we're talking about bullying, we're talking about self-esteem. That's a huge one where really we do self-esteem workshops, sort of laying that ground for healthy relationships and that sort of thing. And then when we get up with the older kids, we're talking about healthy friendships, healthy relationships, domestic violence with the older kids, sexual violence with the older kids at the high school. So we're currently, Ridgefield actually is one of the 3 towns in our catchment area that we are in all of the schools. So every grade level, pretty much every grade level, sees a program of ours. Whether that is a care and kindness program in 1st grade or the high school, we're doing those domestic violence programs. On top of that, the center has support groups and wellness groups and things like that for teens, for adults. One of the things that got me involved in here is we used to have a group called Project B that was specifically teen girls. Now it has morphed into a more curriculum-based support group for girls that we do at the center. We also have its sort of satellite support groups in various schools, some middle schools, some high schools, where we go there and we work with the teen girls. So I hope that was an answer.
That was wonderful.
All right, perfect.
All right, so then down to you, Brianna. Clearly, as a high school teen talk counselor and previously a youth counselor for kids in crisis, you hear a lot about what parents do wrong, or at least what teens perceive they're doing wrong. So pick the top 3 areas where parents can build a more positive relationship with their teen girls or girl-identifying teens.
Okay, yeah, so that's definitely a loaded question. I would say, you know, I've worked with all different ages of children, and a lot of the biggest thing that I hear, especially from the high schoolers, is they're confused because parents are expecting them to be independent and act like an adult. But then they're also being told, no, you can't do that because you're not old enough. So they're in this like weird little limbo where it's like, well, they're telling me to grow up and that I'm not a kid anymore, but then when it comes to one thing, I am still a kid. So I've been working with some of my students on that, and it really just goes back to communication, and I, you know, definitely encourage my students to talk to their parents about that. So what is that, like, you're telling me this, are you telling mom or dad this? Do they know that you're confused and conflicted because they're giving you an area to be independent and then an area that you feel like maybe they're restricting you a little? So that area I would just say talk to your children about, and kind of come up with, I don't want to say a compromise, but maybe like a game plan, like, okay, yeah, I know we're growing up,
but there's also some things that are still in that limbo that, yeah, you're, you know, an 18, 17, 16-year-old person, we still can't do some things that you're wanting to do, and here's why. Like, it all goes back to safety. A lot of it does. So I would say probably that area. Another thing with parenting is just being open, and that goes back to the communication. A lot of the conflicts, like the family conflicts that I'm getting from students, really is the lack of communication.
Hey, what are you saying?
And, you know, a lot of the times it is like frustrating to tell someone, you know, the reasoning behind it. It's like, well, because I said so. And it's like, well, I don't understand why you're telling me that. Like, please elaborate. So just being open in communication is definitely a big area. Let me think about another one. I feel like those are my top two that I've been with. More of the, I guess, another thing non-related to my Kids in Crisis journey. I was also at the Boys and Girls Village for a little bit, where I helped like run parenting courses, kind of, is knowing the like attachment. So once again, that goes back to like that limbo stage. You want to, you know, keep your child safe. You want to have that attachment with them. However, it is also important to let them wander off and then come back. You don't want to keep them on a short leash, but you also don't want to have them on an extended leash and they never come back. So that fine, you know, and it's different for every relationship, but finding that like, okay, I'm gonna give them time to explore on their own, figure out who they are. However, they're gonna know that I'm also still here to help them with that journey, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Okay, so these questions are for anyone who wants to raise their hand or jump in or grab the mic. So, first one, based on what you've learned from working with your clients or the creators and implementers of the programs that your organization supports, what would you say today's teen girls need most from their parents and other significant adults in their lives?
So my background prior was working in New York City and Bexar County, Texas foster care systems for quite a long time. And then running programs for teens, more often teen girls than boys. And I'm the parent of two girls, one who is a teen and one who's 28. So I think we survived the teen years. I'm not really sure about if my husband feels like he survived them, but I think I made it through. And what I will say is, what I think, I look at my 28-year-old and I look at my 19-year-old, and it's the same but slightly different because the dynamics I think are more are greater. There are a lot of forces out there that will have teen girls especially really doubting who they are. And some of that was there with my 28-year-old, but it is 50 times what it is for my 19-year-old. I mean, there's this constant inundation of information. And I think what girls especially, but I think all kids need to know is that you see the child in front of you and that person is valuable, that person is perfect just the way that they are. And sometimes it's being explicit in saying that, you know, like my 28-year-old, I could say you're beautiful and she would hear that. My 19-year-old is like, okay, can we move on, right? But I knew that I know that I still need to say to her, you're beautiful. You're like, just look at you. You're smart. You know, to validate them, to reinforce all those wonderful, even when they act like they actually don't hear you. Because I've heard that 19-year-old having conversations with her friends, so I know that she hears me. And that makes me feel good because then they don't have to go out and seek it from others. And even when they start to doubt themselves, because that's a part of growing up, I'm 52, I still doubt every now and again. But you have to, I think even when they know that, like you said, that there's a core, there's a center at home, and that these people value me, these people see me for who I am, whatever that is, that no matter what anyone else says and does out there, they can come back. Doesn't mean that they're gonna be problem-free. Doesn't mean that they're not gonna have, those moments where they may stray a little bit, but they know that there is a core there in the home that you've built for them.
So, the other thing, so I am a mother of 4, and I really, really struggled as a teenage girl. And I put a lot of pressure on myself in the current job that I'm in, because I want it to mean more than being a coach and more than dance. I want my program to be as therapeutic as possible for these young girls.
Parents into their siblings, so it's gonna be tough, but she'll get it. She'll find it.
I don't know if your daughters are high school age, but they have a very robust arts program at Ridgefield High School. And I used to teach 8th grade, and I would see my artsy kids going up there, and they'd be shy or, have very low self-esteem, and they would come out so incredibly gifted and full. So definitely have your daughter look into all the wonderful arts programs up there too. Everything from, computer art to their AP arts, just really cool stuff. So, any other questions from the audience? Okay,
Yeah, I have a question. I was wondering if anybody on the panel, does anybody ever partner with private schools? Whether they're in private schools, whether they're in Ridgefield or someplace else. We're Ridgefield residents, but my daughter goes to school at Eastern Country Day. So it's a really hard balance when you go to school in one town and you live in another. And I didn't know if anybody, even with like St. Mary's and Worcester and private schools that are closer to, either in Ridgefield or closer than Eastern Country Day is, does anybody ever partner with private schools?
I know we do. So Easton is right outside our catchment area, so we don't work with Easton. But we're Ridgefield Academy, we're at Worcester, we're at a lot of the Catholic schools in Danbury, Bethel, all around there. So we do our best to get into those programs. A lot of those schools really seek us out, which is great. It's been great. We've had great relationships with them. That's the answer.
Okay, no, I was just curious because private
no.
schools come up, so I was wondering where that kind of fell into that.
Yeah.
I would also suggest talking to the school counselors as well. They
Okay.
have a ton of resources that, I know at Ridgefield High School, they love sending out to parents. So if there's anything that you have questions about, I'm sure that they'll be able to direct you in a great area as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, a lot of times with the private schools too, all schools really, they don't know our services like us exist or like Kids in Crisis exist. So if you plant that little seed, we love that. So we can expand our services. So that's always a
Okay,
good thing.
thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Oh, yeah, go ahead, please.
So given how damaging unhealthy relationships can be to teen mental health, what comments do you have for the level of influence and or type of influence parents should have for navigating those type of relationships?
Came in late.
No, that's an excellent question. I definitely see, students, once again, kind of just being like, all they do is yell at me and I can't get a word in. So I encourage them to kind of confront, I guess, almost you would say. Because a lot of the times, do we really realize how we're talking to people? Do we realize, the negative impacts that we're actually doing or saying? So I always encourage my students to try to voice that in an appropriate way. And for parents, on the flip side of it, maybe continue to be more open with how your communication is going. if we're communicating with our children and it's every single time not going well, it's possible that it's also us too, right? I mean, I'm not a parent, so, but it's also, it could be the parent as well. So try to really just take a moment back, go, run the conversation through your head, see, did I say something that maybe could have triggered my child? I didn't realize it was triggering, but maybe it did trigger. So talk about that. So maybe try dissecting it a little bit to see like, okay, how am I negatively impacting? Am I, or, are they taking it the wrong way? Like if you're genuinely trying to express in your mind, you're like, no, I was just trying to keep them safe. But then they're interpreting it that you're not being that way and you're being this monster that, of a parent you are, then that's also an area to kind of talk about too, like the language of it. Like, okay, the child is maybe thinking that the tone of voice you used, for example, could be changed. So if you simply just change that tone of voice, then maybe that conversation could have gone differently. Does that help a little bit? Does that, okay.
For that question, I had that issue with my daughter. At that moment, I said, we both are in a bad shape right now. Let's give it a moment, think about it, and we'll come back. This way we
Yes.
both have time
Yes,
to think what we were talking, and that really helped our relationship.
yeah,
Just to give you an
absolutely.
example. And it was a great help, and she was hurting, I was hurting, and I said, you need to, I think, as a parent, you have to accept we are wrong sometimes too. So we just have to get back, okay, this is not the way to talk, let's have communication with each other, and that has really
Yep.
helped a lot for me, to your questions.
Yes, no, absolutely. And I tell my students that too.
Yeah.
We cannot try to resolve something when both of us are escalated. Or we cannot try to confront someone when it's escalated. That's like me saying, we're in a really bad conversation right now, and then I start being like, yeah, well, you left dirty dishes in the sink, so you need to fix that. You're probably not going to be happy when I'm saying that if we're in a fight. So take time, both separate, defuse the situation, and then we go back and talk about it when we're in a more calm, cool, collective manner.
Oh, yeah, no.
So I have two, well, one, I just would love to, from Fairfield County Foundation, I'd love to hear from you. I know we're talking about teenage girls, but I'm also raising a boy, so I work just as
I
hard.
got this.
I consider it equally important to raise him to be a son who treats, who we don't have to, I guess, see on the flip side of these equations. So I would love to hear about the program you're talking about, if it's an evidence-based program, the one that you said you were doing.
Yeah,
Was that, you were saying to boys, you were talking about in
Yeah.
the athletics, I'd love to hear about that. If there's a name of it or something to maybe get
Coach E just said, because when you guys were,
Anne was the sort of the spearhead.
it sort of predates me. There were 5 partners, including Matt's organization.
Yeah.
And so essentially what it is, coaches as partners. And to the mom who asked, do we have programs that partner with private schools? Those programs are offered in the schools with those coaches. So they're there.
Okay.
And even though our funding for the program itself is done, the funding included the development of that curriculum, and so it continues.
Okay.
It will continue as long as those organizations exist, and there are people who want that program to take place in their space.
Okay. And then the other one, which I guess more of what we're speaking of, so I have a tween daughter, so I'm just starting to go into I've read so much, and I've been so ready for the slide of the self-esteem and the individuating and the fighting against. I've been ready, and I knew it was coming, and now I see it, we're here, and I have, she's not on social media yet, although she does now have, because especially from the pandemic, that became really, now school implemented 50 screens in the house because they had to have those for school, so, there is a fair amount of socializing through that, even though we pretty locked down in our family between custodial, she's not allowed anything yet. But I know it's coming, and even though she knows why we're not doing it, we've had healthy discussions. We're starting to see now, like, okay, now new friend, another friend's got this, and another friend's got this, and another friend's got this. So I'm just wondering if there are, well, if anybody knows of any programs that have education around it, that's great too. Or if you have advice towards the idea of at what point, how do you balance as they go? She's going to eventually I'm going to need to start, to let out the reins. And I know what will happen because I've seen it with older nieces and I see it with peer siblings who are older. And I know for her even, that even already, that she's not a great candidate to be on Instagram or anything. I can see already when she finds out that someone's done something and she's so, the FOMO is real, et cetera, for her. So I guess, are there resources you can point to, or if there's already a course you can point to, or just advice you could give? But at some point, right, they'll be the pariah if they're the only one doing it.
Yeah.
So there's this like delicate balance that I feel like we're walking in this little tightrope of how far do I give, how much, how soon, and when, and then educating her at the same time. So, and I feel like it's so different than when I grew up. I talked with my mom about it. I'm like, you didn't have to deal with any of this stuff. It's such a crazy world that they're growing up in.
I can't speak to any programs per se, and I'll leave that to the folks who are actually in school buildings, but I can say in terms of just overall management. You have rules that are established in your home, and it sounds like this is something you guys have talked about before, all right? And as long as you sort of continue to say, this is, so for instance, in my house, until they were middle school, there was no television during the weekday, during the school week, none. And that was weird for them, but that started when they were, they didn't know anything about it. That was always the rule, it was articulated, and even when they would come home and say, oh, my friend told me about this job, I'm like, we'll record it and watch it on the weekend. And that's what we did. And it was the same thing, the rule in our house was, back then with my older daughter, it was, MySpace. No MySpace until you're 15. Well, I think by the time she got 15, MySpace was. So there was Facebook. But I remember saying to her, no, none of that until you're 15, and you have to friend me, your Aunt Vita, your Aunt Dee, and all these other adults in our lives that I know have a real interest in who she is. And if you can't do that, we can't have Facebook. And that was a rule that was discussed early, right? And so it sounds like you've discussed this early, and whatever that rule is, you're just going to reinforce that rule. They know this. They're not going to like it. That's their job. As I used to tell my daughter, it is my job to set boundaries. It is your job to push them. That's okay. We're going to be fine. But if you sort of look at it that way, that this is what they do, you don't take it personally. Even though you do want to. But you don't. It allows you some space to not take it personally, because that really is what they ought to be doing. They ought to at 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. They should be pushing, right? Because they got to build those muscles so they can go out there and take care of themselves. And that's really, on those very hard days, I had to remember that. Because I worked with a lot of kids who didn't have that. I worked with a lot of kids in care, and I knew what the other side of that was. And my kids had the benefit of knowing my life, my work. They'd seen that. So I could always fall back on, but at least we're here. We're trying. We're doing the best we know how to do. And I think that's the other part of all of that is, look, none of this, I would say to my kids all the time, girl, no computers. I had like the library card system? You're so lucky. And so, the card catalog. And I would make a joke out of it. And that allowed them to sort of almost see how ridiculous it was to get all uptight because they couldn't have a Facebook page. And I get my 19-year-old did slip and get her one, but see, this is why you have all the eyes on the internet, because I found it. That wasn't a fun discussion.
Well, that's a good point that you make, because honestly, this is a tough one for everyone. Like I said, I'm a parent as well, and boy, does that scare me, that transition that you're in right now. I think about it all the time. I'm like, how am I gonna manage that? I speak with I teach at Dance Factory Ridgefield as well, and I work with younger girls that are in late elementary school, middle school. So I ask them questions, because I'm so curious and interested in this. I'm like, do you, like, you have a phone? You're allowed to have TikTok and social media right now? Yes, but there are restrictions. And, I can only be on it from this time to that time. I can't have comments. I really think that's a big one. Like no comments, so people can write on their stuff and say some mean things. So you can post a picture, but you can't have a comment section. I also think that you can always start by making it a positive thing. Start off with the concern conversation. Explain some of the serious safety concerns, especially when it comes to meeting people you don't know from the internet. That cannot happen, and explain the dangers of the internet in that way, and then also go into the insecurity that you could face from being part of social media. And then if she continues to want to, and eventually you're gonna have to, it's just we're in that society, you could be like, listen, I'm gonna be on this journey with you, and we're gonna take it one step at a time. I'm gonna give you, we're gonna try this. You're gonna have a Facebook, and we're gonna start with Facebook. Or you're gonna have an Instagram, we're gonna start with Instagram. And you can just be friends with anyone you can be friends with. If somebody friends you and you don't know that person, you can't be friends with that person. You have to reject that one. I'm allowed to see your social media. You have to friend request me. And you can be on it from this time to that time. And if that goes well and we build trust with that, and you want to and you're interested in doing something different, we can look at that and we can try that slowly and kind of maybe expand further options by doing it that way. But make it seem like we're on a journey together and we're going to build trust through this journey, and you communicate with me how it's working for you, and I'll let you know my feelings on it. And if you can do and follow the restrictions that I'm giving you, then you'll have more freedom in the long run.
I'm the PTA president at East Ridge, and this year the 2 middle schools did do a webinar for the parents and the students on internet safety. And so it's Scott Driscoll, and it's internet safety concepts. And you can go on his website, and there's all kinds of links and information for parents, and there's actually contracts that you can draw up for your students.
Yeah, we've done a lot of internet safety stuff, and I think that's great. Just thinking of the teen girl mind and the real susceptibility to just that slaughtering of self-esteem that already happens just developmentally, naturally, without even adding in Instagram and the rest of it. It just seems it's such a recipe for disaster, but I know at some point I've got to say yes. It'll be, she can't, but not yet, but I like that journey together. That's good, yeah.
In terms of communication, I was thinking about this throughout the seminar today, but I was thinking, we talked a lot about if you have good communication with your kids, but maybe some of you don't have great communication with your kids, and you're finding that your kids aren't opening up to you, and you don't know why. A couple of things that crossed my mind in terms of helping that relationship with communication is coming to them in a vulnerable way, and being vulnerable, and maybe sharing some things that are vulnerable to them, where they feel safe to open up to you about something, not maybe at that same time, but just little drops of vulnerability every once in a while, and opening up about your experiences as a kid maybe. And then the other part of it was not reacting right away to anything that they're saying. This is going a little off topic, but I'll bring it back. But when they tell you something and you want to have a big reaction, just hear it and sit with it, and give them nothing to judge that off of, so that they feel okay, well, that went better than I thought it would. And again, creating that safe space, and then you get some time, this woman was saying, to kind of process the information and come to a place where you feel like you're gonna approach it in this way and say these things in a healthy way. Also, I would encourage you to say things like, do you want me to just listen to you? Or do you want my opinion afterwards? Because sometimes they're not looking for you to fix it. And when you try to fix it, they're like, get away from me, I'm not gonna talk to you. I don't wanna hear your opinion, I don't wanna hear what you have to say.
It's so hard though.
It is so hard, I know. But if you ask them, do you want me to just listen to you? Because I would love to just listen to you.
I've done this and it
Yeah.
totally works.
It absolutely
It totally
works.
works.
Yes.
And I only did it because I heard it somewhere else.
Yeah. So back to what we were talking about with social media, I think it would be really helpful before you introduce it in her life to say, when I was young, I struggled so much when I saw magazines and women and what they looked like on covers of magazines or what they looked like on TV. And I just remember when I was your age, I was so susceptible to these horrible feelings about myself. And I want to protect you from that, but I can't protect you forever, and you're going to make your own choices. And I want you to know going into this that there could be a lot of that develops in you. And maybe if you're more mentally prepared or can talk to me or feel safe talking to me about it as you're going on social media, or even if you find that the social media that we've introduced in your life is making you more insecure, recognize it and maybe take some time away from it. And maybe it's not for you. It's poison in your life. Just recognize that it's a poison, and remove that stuff that's making you insecure. Or unfriend that person that you think is so much more beautiful than you, that's posting pictures all the time that you're comparing yourself to. Eliminate that person so that it doesn't pop up on your notifications all the time, on your news feed. But teach her ways around it, and maybe I think if she goes in blindly, she'll be shocked by how she's feeling. But if you say, these are the concerns, and everyone faces them, and social media is the cause of a lot of them, and we're about to introduce this in your life, she'll be like, okay, kind of more guarded and protected about the process.
Wait, there was one in the back one over there.
I was just gonna make a comment back to what you were saying. I think it's important to go slow, and a lot of tween girls are really susceptible to making a lot of poor choices because of just where they are. And so for myself in my household, I have a 15-year-old who's going to be a sophomore, and then I also have one who's going to 7th grade. I didn't let my daughter do any social media until just before freshman year. She probably was one of the last, but I thought it was a dangerous idea before that. They make a lot of really stupid decisions in middle school. And if she's one of the later ones, but not the last one, she may be able to avoid some of that, some of the FOMO stuff, some of the maybe sending pictures that are inappropriate, lots of just stuff that they face too early, too soon. So that, for what it's worth.
We like to wait until 8th, and I think that's it. I'm like, can we wait till freshman year of college? When you're 40?
There's a question here and then one in the back too. But
Yes, okay, so it's half a response and half a question. So I feel like I'm a double agent tonight because I am Gen Z. I was very recently a teenager. Not too long, but the pandemic kind of makes me feel like, it was yesterday. And so I'm one of the tester cake kids who I came up and in high school were on Facebook, people were leaking things, we were on Twitter, we were just reckless and doing things we shouldn't have been doing. I had friends who were paying their college tuition using TikTok because they went viral. So
They teach me how to do that?
Yeah, and so I guess my response is that from my observation and my own experience, I would say that I had a pretty positive experience with social media because my mom, I trusted my mother, and I trusted my mom when she said let's just get on Facebook when you're 14, and I added her, she didn't have to add me or follow me. I would tag her in things. She wouldn't necessarily tag me in things. And then when I got on Instagram and then when I got on Twitter, she didn't know I got on Twitter. My Twitter was reckless. And it was so messed up. And I made a lot of mistakes, but I was okay. Like, I did crazy things, you know, like, not that crazy, but, you know, for me now, like, girl. I think that also some of my friends had similar experiences, and I think those who had really bad experiences on social media, like, there's truth to the fact that I had a friend who was on eating disorder Tumblr when that was a thing, right? She didn't trust her mother. She had a really horrible relationship with her mother, and so she wasn't going to listen to her mom, and frankly, her mom didn't care that she was on social media. So I think the fact that the parents are here means a lot for their own children's lives, but I think that for your children's friends and the people that are around them, because you're obviously all caring, I think that, like, I think social media is kind of another one that's a missed opportunity to restrict your child from it, because like I said, like, I have friends who paid their college tuition using TikTok, right? Like, it's kind of the future, whether you want to be a part of it or not. I mean, some people don't have to use it, but I think that coming from a space of what do you want to gain rather than fear and what do you want to lose is important. Because there's like a 16-year-old girl I follow who I love, and she's like a Marxist, brilliant, she's breaking down like eco-theory on TikTok, and she's connecting with people and going to marches, like she's going to stage the revolution. Then there's people on TikTok who are actually talking about anti-diet culture. I mean, there's all sorts of resources on social media. I love TikTok, so I don't mention it every 5 seconds. But I think that rather than seeing it as a scary space, like looking at what your children are interested in and finding out to be a resource is really important. Because there was this thing like Ratatouille, the musical that my friend produced, where a bunch of teens and young people on TikTok like kind of wrote a musical for the Disney movie Ratatouille, and it went viral. And like that was a big opportunity for people, and like there are young people who are now like kind of famous and finding friends. Or let's say your kid is queer, and they're trying to figure out what that means. Maybe they'll find, I mean, that's been a thing for a really long time, like queer people finding each other through the internet. I mean, it's actually it could be a really beautiful thing, because it's based off of algorithms. And what's cool about algorithms is that you can tell them what to do. So if you work with your child to program them, it's also how our brains work. You know, the algorithm is based on the human brain. It's like you train your brain, you train the algorithm. So I would suggest coming to it from a space of power. So I'm going to transition to my question.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, of course. So I work for Vibe Theater Experience, shameless plug. We're a nonprofit in Brooklyn, but we went national during the pandemic. We pay our participants to learn about arts programming. So I teach playwriting, I teach workshops surrounding like liberating yourself through queer art, like all different types of things. And we partnered with different theater organizations like the Off-Broadway House, the WP Theater in New York. And we went national, so my niece in Boston was a part of it this past semester, and we're doing virtual programming. I'm partially saying this in case you want to put up your children.
What's the name of the theater?
I'm sorry?
What's the name of the theater?
Vibe Theater.
Vibe.
It's a vibe, yeah, Vibe
Nice.
Theater. And my question is that I noticed with my own participants, like, this sense of burnout and also anxiety, and we did talk about this earlier with the pandemic, but I'm deeply concerned about burnout, because at the same rate as this burnout is happening amongst young people, particularly the Gen Z population, I think my friends and I, we have burnout, but I see it with because I'm young and I'm also working with young people. There's also like escalated levels of pressure. Like each year, college acceptances are getting like record lows to the point where it's terrifying. I think Columbia was 3% last year. I'm an alumna, and that was not the acceptance rate when I got in. So like, what does that mean? So I guess I'm curious as to like what you would suggest parents and I as someone who works with young people, how do you navigate that? Because these are really high pressures, and also like there's this burnout from like the pandemic, high rates of pressure, school pressure from our parents. But then I think that the elephant in the room is like, we kind of came into the world and it was already going to, like climate change, like we're losing our planetary rise, like it's just crazy. And so I guess I hope that is a clear and concise question of like how do you think we should navigate this?
You saw us looking. Yeah, burnout is something that I personally experience. I'm sure many of us experience it. And it's something that I've really seen the Ridgefield students start to struggle with. And their burnout was more of their academics. And what was very interesting to me was it wasn't always coming from the parents. It was coming from the students.
Yes.
And I was just so confused because like, when I was in high school, like my mom was like, okay, you need to get good grades, like we got college to think about. And I'm sure that that's still what parents are, you know, here, we want our children to do well. However, it's the students that are putting such a big pressure on themselves. So what I encouraged my students to do is first, and this can be really tricky, is find out what it feels like when you're about to burn out. So, because then if we can figure out like what our trigger is or when we start to feel like we're burning out, that's when we can intervene at that point. Rather than, okay, I've already burnt out. It's a lot easier to interject before that happens. Sometimes that's not always the case. I always suggest little like breaks during the day. And it's something that you need to enjoy doing. You know, I feel like a lot of social media is like, oh, go on a run or go on a walk. What if you don't like running and what if you hate walking? Like that's not gonna help you, that's just gonna make you feel worse. If you like to read, take 10 minutes out of your day and read. I always tell my students, and this can go for work-related things as well, so advice for everyone, including myself, if you're in the middle of a really hard task and you just feel like you're not getting anywhere with it, take a break. Because if you keep going after it, it's just going to make the assignment 10 times harder and put you in a really, really bad mental health status. So take those breaks. It doesn't need to be an hour. It can be 5 minutes of just deep breathing. It can be 10-minute walk, whatever you enjoy doing. And also, for students, if it's more of the academic stuff, I really encouraged my students to figure out their own organization's like pattern. Sometimes it's writing everything out, making a checklist, or sometimes it's using a planner. For example, when finals were coming, all the finals all at once, it stinks. You have to cram all of your studying done and you know, you have projects in the middle of it. Okay, what subject are we struggling with the most? Let's start there. Let's do an hour of that. Then, okay, we need to work on our project. Let's do 15 minutes of that. Breaking it down, but in a way that works for you and your learning style and your organization skills. So just taking a big picture and chopping it up into small pieces is super helpful because now it's not a huge thing anymore. It's just small individual things rather than this big, massive thing that you're like, how am I going to get this done? So I hope that helps.
It helped me.
I just have to call time, sorry.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Well, before you call time, I want to introduce Jason Peck and also Jonathan Wynn, the co-founders of Throwing Stone. They're the ones who are bringing this wonderful theatrical group to our community. So thank you, gentlemen.
We have quite a Thank you to all the panelists, all of the wonderful questions all of you fielded today. Thank you so very, very much.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.